"Do not touch that car," Nolan Pierce said. For minutes and 37 seconds later, the Bugatti Chiron came alive beneath Ethan Cole's hands, and nobody in the glass pavilion remembered how to breathe. The W16 engine settled into a deep, controlled idle that rolled through the polished floor and climbed the steel columns above them. 5 engineering teams stood around the display platform with diagnostic tablets still glowing in their hands. Men and women who had arrived from 5 of the largest technology companies in the country, carrying equipment worth more than Ethan's entire house, now watched a contract mechanic in a gray work shirt sit behind the wheel of a $3 million machine they had failed to start. Avery Sinclair stood 20 feet away beside the empty presentation stage. Her back remained straight, but the fingers around her water glass had stopped moving. The international investors behind her had been waiting for the vehicle demonstration that was supposed to open the Sinclair Future Mobility Summit. The countdown screen above the stage showed 13 minutes remaining before the broadcast began. No one looked at it anymore. They were looking at Ethan. More precisely, they were looking at the small black module resting in his left hand. Nolan was looking at it too. He did not look relieved. He did not look impressed. He looked afraid. Ethan noticed because Ethan noticed things before he explained them. A loose connector. A delayed relay. A warning light appearing 1 fraction of a second before the others. Fear worked the same way. It usually arrived somewhere small before it reached the face. Beside the service entrance, Sophie Cole sat on a folding chair with a blue toy Bugatti held against her coat. She was 7 years old, patient in the way children became patient when they had spent enough afternoons waiting for a parent to finish work. Her mother had given her the toy before the hospital visits began. Ethan had repaired one wheel twice and the tiny headlamps once, but Sophie still carried it as if nothing about it had ever broken. Dr. Marcus Vail, leader of the 5th engineering team, stepped closer to the platform. His expression had changed from skepticism to concentration. "What did you disconnect?" he asked. Ethan switched off the engine. The sudden silence felt larger than the sound had. He placed the module on a clean cloth without answering immediately. 2 thin data leads extended from its housing. One carried the manufacturer's markings. The other did not. Nolan moved forward. "That device belongs to the event display system," he said. "It has nothing to do with the failure." Ethan looked at the error screen. Every warning had disappeared. Security authorization restored. Powertrain communication restored. Central network stable. 5 companies had replaced sensors, reset software, and blamed separate systems. Ethan had removed one command pretending to be 5 failures. Avery set down her glass. "Then why," she asked Nolan, "did the car start when he took it out?" No one answered. Ethan looked at the module again. A faint status light continued blinking even though it was no longer connected to the Bugatti. It was still transmitting. That was when he understood the vehicle had never been the real target. 24 minutes earlier, he had entered the pavilion only to collect a signature for his unpaid service invoice. By the time he left, the car would be running, the summit would continue, and the woman who owned the company would discover that someone inside it had been stealing far more than 5 minutes. 24 minutes earlier, the Bugatti sat silent beneath a ceiling of glass while 5 engineering teams worked around it in widening circles of frustration. The Sinclair Future Mobility Summit had been built around the car. Its midnight blue body reflected the stage lights, the investment banners, and the faces of several hundred guests who had stopped pretending not to watch. Avery Sinclair stood near the presentation platform with Jenna Brooks at her side, listening as one explanation replaced another. The battery management team blamed a voltage handshake. The software group blamed an authentication failure. The security engineers suspected an immobilizer fault. The powertrain specialists pointed toward a network interruption. The 5th team, led by Dr. Marcus Vail, had found no physical defect at all. Every theory sounded reasonable. None of them made the engine turn. Nolan Pierce moved between the teams with a tablet pressed against his chest, offering updates that grew more confident as the situation became less controlled. "The next reset will clear it," he told Avery. 3 minutes later, the reset failed. The demonstration was scheduled to begin at 10. A contract worth $42 million depended on the vehicle launching the company's new mobility platform in front of investors and industry press. Avery did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "How much time?" she asked. Nolan looked at the clock. 15 minutes. "That was not my question." He glanced toward the engineers. "We are close." Across the pavilion, Ethan Cole entered through the service door holding Sophie's hand. He had not come to repair the Bugatti. His assignment had ended before sunrise, after he completed transportation checks on 3 display vehicles and replaced a damaged sensor cable on a support van. The finance office still owed him a signature before releasing payment, and the person responsible had stopped answering messages. Sophie walked beside him in a red coat, the blue toy Bugatti tucked under one arm. She had spent enough mornings at job sites to understand when silence meant adults were worried. Ethan stopped near the logistics desk and waited while Jenna searched for the payment form. From where he stood, he could see the diagnostic display reflected in the glass wall. The error list refreshed again. Security lockout. Powertrain communication failure. Battery authorization denied. Central control interruption. 5 warnings appeared so quickly that the screen seemed to flash once. Then all 5 settled into place. Ethan looked at the timestamps. He did not move closer. He did not ask to join the discussion. He simply watched the sequence repeat after another reset. Sophie followed his eyes. "Why do all the red lights come on together?" she asked. Ethan looked down at her, then back at the screen. "Because they are listening to the same bad instruction." Jenna heard him. She stopped searching through the paperwork. "What did you say?" Ethan pointed toward the display from where he stood. 5 separate systems do not fail in the same thousandth of a second unless something tells them to. Nolan turned at the sound of his voice. He recognized Ethan as the contract mechanic from the loading crew and gave a short, dismissive laugh. "We have 5 of the best technical teams in the country working on this." Ethan nodded once. "Then they already know the parts are not the problem." Dr. Vale looked toward the timestamps. His expression tightened. Avery followed his gaze, then studied Ethan for the first time. Gray work shirt. Worn tool bag. A child holding a toy car beside him. Nothing about the picture matched the room. "Can you prove it?" she asked. Nolan stepped between them. "He is not authorized to touch the vehicle." Ethan did not argue. He looked at the display, then at the countdown clock above the stage. "Give me 5 minutes," he said. "And turn off every wireless system in this pavilion." Avery looked at the countdown clock, then at the silent Bugatti. 11 minutes remained before the presentation. Around the car, 5 engineering teams had stopped moving, not because they agreed with Ethan, but because the chief executive had not dismissed him. Nolan Pierce stepped closer to her. "Turning off the pavilion network will interrupt the stage systems, the investor feed, and the security display," he said. "That is unnecessary." Ethan stood beside the logistics desk with Sophie's hand in his. "Then do not turn it off," he said. "But if the cars start sending the same errors again, you will know the network is part of the problem." Nolan gave a thin smile. "That is not diagnosis. That is theater." Ethan did not answer. He looked at the warning screen once more. Every fault still carried the same timestamp down to the thousandth of a second. Battery authorization. Security lockout. Powertrain interruption. Central network failure. 5 different systems. 1 moment. Avery followed his eyes. She had built Sinclair Dynamics by noticing when confident people repeated themselves instead of answering. Nolan had said they were close 4 times. The car had remained silent all 4 times. "Jenna," she said, "take the pavilion network offline." Nolan turned toward her. "Avery." She did not raise her voice. "Now." Jenna moved to the control station and issued the shutdown. The digital banners froze. Wireless presentation tablets lost connection. Several guests looked toward the stage, confused. The room grew quieter. Ethan handed Sophie his tool bag and crouched beside her. "Stay with Jenna," he said. Sophie nodded and held the blue toy Bugatti against her coat. He walked toward the real car without hurry. Nolan blocked the edge of the display platform. "You are not certified on this vehicle." "I am not opening the engine," Ethan said. "Then what are you doing?" "Looking for the system that does not belong." Avery stepped between them with a small movement of her hand. Nolan moved aside. The clock above the stage changed to 4 minutes 59 seconds. Ethan did not lift the hood. He opened the passenger door and leaned into the cabin, studying the service panel beneath the dashboard. Dr. Marcus Vale watched from the opposite side. "The factory data gateway is behind the center console," he said. "I know," Ethan replied. "This is not the factory gateway." He removed a narrow trim cover and exposed a second cable routed behind the original harness. It was cleanly installed, wrapped in black cloth tape, and connected to a compact module hidden beside the event interface. Nolan spoke immediately. "That controls the synchronized lighting demonstration." Ethan looked at the 2 data leads attached to it. One entered the display system. The other disappeared into the vehicle network. Lighting does not need access to powertrain authentication. Dr. Vale stepped closer. His skepticism changed shape. Ethan connected a portable reader without altering the module. 2 authorization packets appeared on the screen, arriving fractions of a second apart. One came from the Bugatti's security controller. The other copied the same identifier with a different encryption response. The car was receiving 2 answers to one question. It treated the conflict as an intrusion and locked every protected system at once. Sophie watched from Jenna's side. "Like when both buttons on my toy got stuck," she said softly. Ethan glanced toward the blue car in her hands. Months earlier, 2 damaged switches had sent opposing commands to its tiny circuit board. The scale was different. The logic was not. The clock showed 3 minutes 12 seconds. Ethan isolated the event module from the vehicle network, leaving the factory gateway untouched. Nolan reached toward the cable. Avery stopped him with one sentence. "Let him finish." Ethan reset the authentication sequence and waited. The first warning disappeared. Then the second. Around the platform, 5 teams watched the error list empty line by line. Ethan sat behind the wheel. 2 minutes remained. Nolan folded his arms. "The engine still will not start." Ethan pressed the ignition. The starter turned once, clean and immediate. Then the W16 engine filled the pavilion with sound. For 3 seconds, no one moved. The engine's low mechanical rhythm spread through the pavilion, steady and controlled, while the countdown clock continued above the stage as if nothing important had changed. Ethan kept one hand near the ignition and watched the instrument panel complete its checks. Oil pressure stable. Cooling system normal. Security authorization accepted. No warning returned. Dr. Marcus Vale lowered the diagnostic tablet he had been holding for almost an hour. One engineer from the battery team looked at another, then toward the exposed module near the passenger footwell. Nobody applauded. The sound of the W16 was enough. Avery stood beside the display platform with her water glass untouched on the table behind her. She looked at the running car, then at Ethan, then finally at Nolan Pierce. "How long?" she asked. Jenna checked the service timer. 4 minutes and 37 seconds. A quiet movement passed through the crowd as guests began to understand what had happened. 5 teams had spent most of the morning replacing assumptions. Ethan had spent less than 5 minutes removing one false instruction. He switched off the engine, and the silence returned sharper than before. Sophie stepped closer from the logistics desk, still holding the blue toy car. Ethan opened the passenger door and removed the compact module without disturbing the factory harness. He placed it on a clean cloth and disconnected only the event-side power lead. The device's status light continued blinking. Dr. Vale leaned over it. "It should be dead," he said. Ethan turned the module until the underside faced the light. A separate battery cell had been installed beneath the casing. Beside it was a small wireless transmitter and a memory chip larger than any lighting controller required. Nolan moved forward. "The module stores performance data for the presentation." "Then it should store stage timing," Ethan said. "Not powertrain traffic." Avery stepped closer. "What exactly has it been collecting?" Ethan connected the module to his portable reader in isolated mode. The screen filled with transmission records, each grouped by date and vehicle session. He did not open the files. He only displayed their destinations. The data had not remained inside Sinclair Dynamics. It had been sent repeatedly to an outside server, including during closed testing sessions that had never been part of the summit demonstration. Jenna looked over Ethan's shoulder. "That address is not on our approved network list." Nolan's voice remained controlled. "Third-party analytics. We use external vendors." Avery looked at him. "Which vendor?" He hesitated just long enough. Ethan saw it. So did she. Dr. Vale examined the connection history. "This module has been copying encrypted diagnostic traffic for at least 6 weeks. One of the outside engineering team stepped away from the car, suddenly aware that their own equipment might have communicated through the same compromised network." Avery asked Jenna to pull the installation authorization. Jenna searched the event records, then stopped. The approval came from the technical division. Nolan exhaled through his nose. "Of course it did. That is my department." "It also carries your direct authorization," Jenna said. The room became quiet again, but this silence was different. The first had belonged to surprise. This one belonged to recognition. Nolan looked toward Ethan, not Avery. "A contract mechanic does not understand the security architecture of this company." Ethan closed the reader. "I understand when a device is pretending to be something it is not." Avery looked at the blinking module between them. The car had been repaired. The demonstration could continue. Yet the problem standing beside it had only just begun. Avery did not look away from Nolan. Around them, the summit staff waited for an instruction, the investors waited for reassurance, and 5 engineering teams waited to learn whether the problem had ended with the engine or begun with the module. She turned to Jenna. "Take the car off the presentation network. Isolate every device connected to that server. Preserve the logs." Nolan stepped forward. "That will interrupt the summit. Then the summit will adjust." Her voice stayed level. "The company will not." Jenna moved immediately. The main display screens went dark one by one, leaving only the natural morning light pouring through the glass roof. The Bugatti remained at the center of the pavilion, now silent again, its deep blue paint reflecting hundreds of uncertain faces. Ethan stood beside the passenger door with the module sealed inside an anti-static bag. Sophie waited near the service entrance, holding the toy car against her coat. She did not understand corporate theft or encrypted diagnostics. She understood that her father had fixed something and that the adults were still worried. Dr. Marcus Vale asked to inspect the transmission history. Ethan handed him the isolated reader but kept the module on the table. "Read-only mode," he said. Marcus nodded. There was no resistance in him now. Together, they reviewed the connection record. The device had copied vehicle performance data during private testing sessions, then sent compressed packets to an outside server at regular intervals. The destination changed twice, but the routing certificate remained the same. Jenna searched the vendor database. The certificate belongs to Northstar Applied Systems. Avery looked at Nolan. I have never heard of them. A temporary analytics contractor, he replied. They were approved for event integration. Jenna's fingers stopped over the keyboard. Northstar is registered to a holding company. She opened another record. The holding company lists an address in Delaware and a managing member named Pure Strategic Ventures. The name settled over the room without needing explanation. Nolan's face changed only slightly, but Ethan saw the small movement in his jaw. That is an investment entity, Nolan said. It has no operational role here. Avery walked toward him, stopping several feet away. Then explain why a company connected to you has been receiving proprietary data from my vehicles. Nolan glanced toward the investors at the rear of the pavilion. Not here. You installed it here. His control began to thin. You are accepting conclusions from a mechanic who has been inside the system for less than 10 minutes. Ethan said nothing. Marcus did. The timestamps begin 6 weeks before he arrived. Several engineers turned toward Nolan at once. Jenna opened the installation approval and displayed the digital authorization. Nolan's name appeared beside the final sign-off. Avery asked security operations to suspend his system access pending review. Nolan reached for his phone. The screen showed no connection. The pavilion network was already isolated. For the first time that morning, he had no system left to hide behind. He looked at Ethan. You have damaged evidence by removing that module. Ethan placed the anti-static bag beside the untouched connector photographs and the diagnostic record. I documented the wiring before disconnection. I removed power only after the car stabilized. The storage was never opened. Marcus examined the record and nodded. The chain is intact. Avery did not raise her voice when she spoke. Nolan, you are suspended effective immediately. You will leave the technical floor and surrender your access credentials. The room did not erupt. No one celebrated. The engineers stepped aside, creating a path toward the exit. Nolan looked once at the Bugatti, then at the module that had exposed him. Ethan did not return the stare. He was watching Sophie, making sure she was still where he had left her. Avery noticed. In a room full of people protecting careers, the man who had changed everything was still thinking first about getting his daughter home. The summit resumed 40 minutes later, but the room had changed. The Bugatti started on the first attempt, the investor presentation moved forward, and the $42 million agreement remained on the table, yet no one watched the car the same way. The vehicle was no longer only a centerpiece. It was evidence. Ethan stayed near the service entrance while Dr. Marcus Vale and Sinclair Security copied the diagnostic record under Jenna's supervision. He did not join the stage presentation. He did not stand where the cameras could find him. He packed his reader, checked that every connector had been restored to factory position, and returned each tool to its place in the worn canvas bag. Sophie sat on the folding chair with the blue toy Bugatti resting in her lap. The excitement had passed through her without changing her posture. She was hungry, tired, and waiting for the promise her father had made that morning. Pancakes after the job. Ethan checked the time. Avery found them before he reached the exit. She had removed the summit microphone from her jacket and carried no assistant, no security employee, and no prepared statement. You are leaving, she said. Ethan adjusted the strap of his tool bag. My work order ended at 6:30. You just prevented a systems breach. I repaired a network conflict. You also identified where the data was going. Ethan looked toward the technical table where Marcus and Jenna were preserving the records. They can take it from here. Avery studied him with the same focus she had given the warning screen earlier, as though there was still one part of the problem she could not read. "Why were you working logistics?" she asked. "You understood the vehicle architecture better than 5 teams brought in specifically for this car." Ethan did not answer immediately. Sophie looked up at him, then at Avery. The child's silence made the question feel less professional than Avery intended. "I used to design diagnostic systems," Ethan said. "For whom?" "A performance division in Michigan." "Used to?" He looked toward Sophie. That was all. Avery followed his gaze and saw the toy in the girl's hands, the repaired wheel held by a small silver pin, the plastic headlamp sealed with a thin line of clear adhesive. "Her mother?" Avery asked quietly. Ethan's expression did not change, but his hand settled on Sophie's shoulder. 3 years ago. Avery nodded once. She had negotiated acquisitions, closed factories, and removed executives without carrying their silence home. This silence was different. Ethan had not stepped away from engineering because he lacked talent. He had stepped away because hospital appointments had become school pickups, because grief had left a child who still needed dinner, and because the best job in the country meant nothing if it made him absent from the only life that depended on him. Jenna approached with Ethan's unsigned invoice and a payment release form. "Finance approved it," she said. "Full amount, including the emergency diagnostic fee." Ethan signed, folded the copy, and placed it in his bag. Avery watched the amount on the form. It was less than Sinclair Dynamics had spent flying one technical team into the city. "I want to offer you a position," she said. Ethan glanced toward the clock again. "I already have one. Contract logistics is not a position equal to what you can do. It is equal to the hours I can give." Sophie slipped her hand into his. The gesture answered the rest. Avery looked through the glass doors at the stage, where her company was presenting a future built around intelligence, speed, and human-centered technology. Then she looked at the man leaving before the applause because his daughter had been promised breakfast. "Let me write the offer differently," she said. Ethan paused at the door. He did not agree. He did not refuse. "Write the hours first," he said. Then he walked out with Sophie, leaving Avery beside the repaired Bugatti and a company that had spent millions searching for expertise while overlooking the person carrying it through the service entrance. By Monday morning, North Star Applied Systems no longer existed on paper. Its public website had been taken offline, its listed office in Delaware was an empty suite above a shipping store, and the 2 phone numbers attached to its registration led to disconnected lines. Sinclair Security preserved the server records before access disappeared completely, but what they found was larger than one stolen stream of Bugatti data. The module had been used as a test. 6 weeks of vehicle traffic had been copied to measure how much proprietary information could leave the company without triggering an alert. If the summit demonstration had succeeded without interruption, Nolan planned to install the same architecture across Sinclair's prototype fleet. Avery read the report alone in her office before sunrise. The city beyond the windows was still gray, and the untouched coffee beside her had gone cold. Every approval carried Nolan's credentials. Every exception had been buried beneath ordinary event language. Temporary integration. Performance analytics. Display synchronization. Words designed to make theft resemble maintenance. At 7:15, Jenna entered with the rewritten employment proposal. Avery had removed the executive title, the required travel, and the 60-hour schedule. In their place was a project consulting agreement built around school hours, remote diagnostic access, and 2 days each week at Sinclair's testing center. Ethan would retain ownership of every tool and method he brought with him. No evening meetings without advance approval. No automatic renewal. No restrictions on outside repair work. Avery had never written an offer around what a candidate refused to sacrifice. She had always assumed serious people arranged their lives around opportunity. Ethan had shown her that some people arranged opportunity around responsibility. He returned to the pavilion that afternoon only because Dr. Marcus Vale requested his help documenting the original network conflict. Sophie came with him after school, carrying a purple folder and the blue toy car. The summit banners had been removed. The grand room now looked smaller without guests, champagne glasses, or stage lighting. 5 technical teams had left behind crates, cables, and pages of notes. Ethan walked past them without comment. Marcus met him beside the Bugatti and handed him a tablet. "We found 3 different diagnostic theories built on the corrupted data," he said. "All technically reasonable." Ethan reviewed the logs. They followed the warnings they were given. Marcus looked toward him. "You are being generous. They were not the ones creating the warnings." Across the pavilion, several engineers who had dismissed Ethan during the summit watched him work. Their posture had changed. No folded arms. No private smiles. One of them approached and asked how he had recognized the timestamp pattern so quickly. Ethan answered without making the question expensive. He explained that independent failures create separate histories. A command creates coordination. He showed them the millisecond alignment and the duplicated authorization packet. Within 20 minutes, the same people who had once stood between him and the car were standing behind him, taking notes. Avery arrived near the end of the review. She did not interrupt. She watched Sophie complete her homework at the logistics desk while Ethan reconstructed the failure for a room full of specialists. He never reminded them that they had laughed. He never used their mistake to enlarge himself. When the final record was signed, Avery placed the new contract on the work table. Ethan read the first page, then the schedule, then the exit terms. "You changed the position," he said. "You told me to write the hours first." Sophie looked up from her folder. Ethan turned one more page. The consulting rate was high, but not theatrical. The authority was real, but limited to the work. He signed once and returned the pen. Avery did not smile until he did. Then Marcus called from the vehicle. The isolated module had activated again inside the evidence case, attempting to contact a second server no one had found. Ethan looked toward the blinking light. Nolan's access had been suspended. The transmitter was still receiving instructions. Someone else inside Sinclair was listening. Marcus placed the evidence case on the work table and stepped back while Ethan connected the transmitter to an isolated power source. The status light blinked once every 6 seconds, too regular to be random and too deliberate to be a failed battery. Avery closed the pavilion doors and asked Jenna to suspend all outgoing network traffic from the technical floor. Sophie remained at the logistics desk with her homework open, watching the adults lower their voices again. Ethan did not open the stored data. He traced the new signal only far enough to identify the destination handshake. The second server was not external. It was inside Sinclair Dynamics. "Someone built a relay," he said. The outside company received the files, but an internal system decided when to send them. Avery looked toward the dark control booths above the pavilion. "Who has access?" Jenna opened the infrastructure map. "Event systems, vehicle testing, information security, executive technical operations." Marcus frowned. "That is half the building." Ethan studied the connection timing. Every activation occurred within minutes of a vehicle entering a secure test bay. The module had not been awakened manually. It had been responding to a maintenance beacon broadcast by the building itself. "Do not search by employee," Ethan said. "Search by equipment." Jenna compared the beacon identifier against the asset registry. One system matched, a diagnostic gateway installed in the prototype lab 18 months earlier. The approval belonged to Nolan. The maintenance account did not. It belonged to an automated service profile created under the name of a former information security director who had retired the previous year. Avery's expression hardened. "A dormant account." "Not dormant," Ethan said. "Hidden inside scheduled maintenance." Jenna contacted Sinclair's independent cybersecurity team and placed the gateway into containment. The moment they isolated it, the module stopped blinking. No one celebrated. A second discovery had only widened the first. The gateway held copies of test schedules, vehicle identifiers, engineering reports, and encrypted performance archives from 3 unreleased prototypes. Nolan had designed the path, but the system had continued operating after his access was suspended because he had built the theft into routine maintenance. It did not require another accomplice. It required people to trust the word automatic. Avery stood beside the work table, reading the audit summary as it formed. How long would this have continued, she asked. Ethan looked at the archived schedule. Until someone stopped believing the warning labels. Marcus gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh under different circumstances. Jenna began the preservation process while outside counsel and the independent security team joined by secure call. Ethan documented the transmitter state, the relay timing, and the exact moment the internal gateway was isolated. He did not touch more than necessary. Avery noticed that too. Nolan had hidden his scheme inside complexity, expecting everyone to assume that only people with titles could understand it. Ethan dismantled that assumption without saying so. By early evening, the prototype lab was secured, the affected systems were offline, and every copied file had been identified. Sophie had fallen asleep with her head resting on the purple folder, the toy Bugatti beside her hand. Avery walked over and gently moved a stack of papers away from the edge of the desk so they would not fall near the child. Ethan saw the gesture but said nothing. The company will announce an independent review tomorrow, Avery said. The board will ask who found the relay. Ethan closed his tool bag. Tell them the system did. The system had been speaking for 18 months. He looked toward Sophie. Then tell them someone finally listened. The independent review began the next morning before the first shift arrived. Avery opened every technical archive, suspended every automated maintenance account, and invited an outside security firm to examine the prototype network without Sinclair's supervision. By noon, the board had confirmed what Ethan already understood. Nolan had not stolen one file or copied one vehicle. He had built a quiet system that turned routine diagnostics into a private pipeline, then trusted complexity to protect him. The stolen data included thermal maps, battery management research, aerodynamic testing, and control strategies from 3 unreleased vehicles. None of it had been sold yet. That mattered legally. It did not matter morally. Avery stood before the board with Jenna on one side and Dr. Marcus Vale on the other. Ethan sat near the end of the table because Avery had asked him to explain the sequence, not because he wanted a place there. Sophie was at school. His phone rested face down beside him, an alarm set for 2:45 so he would not miss pickup. Nolan joined through legal counsel and denied intending to transfer proprietary information. He called the gateway an experimental analytics platform. He called the hidden account an administrative shortcut. He called the outside server a temporary vendor environment. Ethan listened without expression. When the board chair asked whether the failure could have been accidental, Ethan opened the timeline. An accident does not rename itself every 3 weeks, he said. He showed the changing server addresses, the duplicated authorization packets, and the scheduled maintenance windows chosen to avoid human review. He did not accuse Nolan of greed. He did not need to. The pattern carried its own motive. Marcus confirmed the technical findings. Jenna presented the authorization history. The outside security firm verified that Ethan had preserved the device without altering stored data. The board voted to terminate Nolan's employment, refer the records for formal investigation, and rebuild the company's security controls under independent oversight. No one raised a voice. No one applauded. The decision entered the room with the same weight as the Bugatti's engine had days earlier, undeniable because it had finally become measurable. After the meeting, Avery found Ethan near the elevator, reading a message from Sophie's school about a missing permission form. "You changed the direction of this company," she said. He typed a reply before looking up. The company changed direction when you allowed the network to be shut down. Most people would have taken credit. Most people were not watching the clock. Avery glanced at the time and understood. You have 20 minutes. 18. They rode down together. In the lobby, employees who had never noticed Ethan at the service entrance now recognized him. Some nodded. Others stepped aside. He returned each gesture without slowing. Outside, the afternoon was cold and bright. Avery walked with him to the curb, carrying the final consulting agreement. The board approved everything, she said. 2 days each week. No evening meetings. Project authority over vehicle diagnostics. Your outside work remains yours. Ethan read the first page, then the schedule. And school holidays? Blocked unless you request otherwise. He signed against the hood of his truck. Avery handed him a company access badge. He looked at it, then placed it in his tool bag beside a worn photograph of Sophie and her mother. You could have had an executive office, she said. Ethan closed the bag. I already have a place where my work matters. At 3:12, he was waiting outside Sophie's school with 2 paper cups of hot chocolate, one cooling in the cup holder. Avery watched his truck disappear into traffic and realized the company had spent years rewarding people who stayed late, spoke loudly, and made themselves visible. The man who saved it had left on time. 3 weeks later, the Bugatti returned to Ethan's garage for a routine inspection. This time Avery brought the keys herself.